Drones are about to become submarines. Meet the Orca. This isn't just any underwater drone. The Orca is part of the Navy's bold strategy to counter China's growing naval ambitions, particularly in its plans for Taiwan. And there's every reason for confidence. Let's take a look at this new kind of predator and why the US Navy wants a lot of them, fast, because it's in a race against time. The US Navy is testing a few underwater drones, but the Orca is the largest of them. How big is it? Mack truck big. It's 85 feet long, weighing 85 tons, and has a maximum speed of 8 knots. The first prototype arrived for the Navy in December 2023. 2 more came by June 2024, fulfilling the first contract in just months, and 4 more are currently under construction in Huntington Beach, California. According to Boeing, the Orca's manufacturer, work on this drone began in 2012 under the name Echo Voyager. The US Navy expressed interest in 2017. Understandably, it wanted them sooner, with an initial target date of December 2020, but the COVID-19 pandemic and manufacturing difficulties that required a redesign led to delays. Why does the Navy want Orcas so badly? Because they're smart and they're going to free up a lot of manned labor. They're versatile, able to undertake missions that would normally be too risky, and most of all, they're cheap and easy to produce, an attribute that matters a lot by itself. Why? To find out, let's take a look at the problem the Orca is intended to solve. China is building up its navy rapidly. It's pumping out more ships and increasing their quality in quick fashion. In fact, a slide leaked from a US Navy intelligence briefing in 2023 revealed that China has 232 times the shipbuilding capacity of the United States. Chinese shipyards can produce 23.25 million tons per year, while their American counterparts can produce less than 100,000. China's Navy now has more ships than the United States, 355 to 296 as of 2020. By 2035, the Navy expects the gap to widen. The Pentagon expects that China will have 475 ships, while the United States will have somewhere between 305 and 317. The practical numerical disparity is greater than that though, because the United States can't concentrate its ships in the contested theater the way that China can. The US Navy has a global mission after all. It still has higher quality and heavier ships than China that are more useful and survivable in a real battle, but the Chinese are improving there too. There is always a tendency to want to use the power you've built, especially if you're an authoritarian country like China with grand foreign policy ambitions. That's what Washington increasingly expects. The year 2027 looms large in America's halls of power. It's the year national security experts believe that Xi Jinping could be ready to make his move. In 2023, the now outgoing CIA director William Burns reiterated that Xi had instructed China's military leadership to be ready to take Taiwan by force in 2027. That does not necessarily mean an invasion attempt will happen that year, but if you're the United States, you don't want to just sit on your hands and hope that it doesn't. Taiwan's fall would be disastrous for American national security, and it would mean a crippling blow to the US economy through years of disruption to vital semiconductors and the loss of the linchpin of the first island chain, which naturally contains China's in the waters close to its homeland. American allies in the Indo-Pacific region would be under China's gun even more than they are now, and under pressure to kowtow to its interests. Meanwhile, the United States would need to spend more money to defend the second island chain. In short, the fall of Taiwan would achieve Xi Jinping's grandest dream, bringing the island back under the mainland's governance and hamstringing American power in the East. There are very big incentives for him to make the move. Alright, so there's the problem. The solution is to restore a deteriorating deterrence situation around Taiwan quickly, but America's limited shipbuilding capacity means that it can't do it easily. It can't just pump out ships when the capacity isn't there. Fortunately for the US Navy, there is one decisive advantage it still has over China: submarines. The US Navy's submarines are much quieter, can dive deeper, and stay at sea for longer than China's. China is lacking in counter-submarine warfare too. The US submarine fleet would make any attempt to invade Taiwan even more difficult. Now, America intends to add to its submarine numbers with a cheap and lethal drone submarine. That's the Orca. Now that we've met it, let's dive beneath the waves with it and see what it can really do. The only limitation on the Orca's versatility is the way in which it's launched. Because of its size, it's too big to be put to sea from one of the Navy's manned submarines, so it will need to begin its mission from a surface ship or a pier at one of the Navy's bases. Once it's in the water, there's not much it can't do. Why? The Orca has no crew and can operate fully autonomously for up to 2 days in difficult underwater environments and at a range of 120 nautical miles. Like the real Orca, this robotic killer whale is designed to be intelligent and adaptable. Look beneath the metallic skin and you'll see why. The core vehicle hosts the drone's guidance, navigation, propulsion, communications, and situational awareness systems. And what's an Orca without a dorsal fin? When it's close to the surface, the robotic Orca can raise a fin to link up with orbiting satellites and get up-to-date intelligence. The Navy expects the Orca to get smarter in its early service life, as it intends to add synthetic aperture sonar to this drone. Once installed, the Orca will be able to map out the ocean floor and provide even more information to the sailors it serves. Okay, so this thing is smart, but the Orca isn't there to just gather intelligence. If that were the case, China might not be as afraid of it. This drone has a 34-foot-long payload section in the aft with a capacity of up to 8 tons. When it comes to offensive operations, the Navy's first plan for the Orca is to use it as a mine dispensary. This idea is part of a broader strategy to reinvigorate America's naval mine capability. Specifically, the Orca is designed to deliver the new Clandestine Delivered Mine (CDM), a cylindrical-shaped explosive created to work with drone submersibles. The Orca is an ideal platform to dispense mines because it allows manned parts of the fleet to focus on less repetitive tasks. The Taiwan Strait is also an optimal place to lay these mines. The waters here are confined and shallow. Using mines to obstruct the movement of Chinese ships is a no-brainer when it comes to the defense of the island. To make matters better, sinking those ships with mines comes at a much lower cost than sinking them with anti-ship missiles or heavy torpedoes, which can run into 6 or 7 figures per shot. If Russia's invasion of Ukraine has taught the world anything, it's that ammunition gets depleted quickly in a peer or near-peer conflict. Expensive shots that come from sophisticated supply chains need to be used wisely. Since any invasion of Taiwan will be telegraphed well in advance, the Orcas would have a good window of opportunity to literally lay the groundwork for disruption with minimal risk. Manned mine-laying ships would come within the Chinese missile threat, but an Orca, the Chinese brass would need to think twice about whether they would want to use expensive missiles or other assets to attack these cheap drones, if they can even find them in the first place. But more on that in a bit. On the flip side of this coin, the Orca is an ideal, low-risk craft for mine-sweeping missions, which the US Navy has also seen the need to reinvigorate. Minesweeping is an ability that has particularly deteriorated over the years, even before the end of the Cold War. The US Navy only has 8 ships dedicated to mine and anti-mine warfare, and the youngest of them is 30 years old. The US Navy doesn't intend for the Orca to stop at mine warfare though. The payload is designed to be modular, so it can carry out more than one mission. Torpedoes? Yep, the Orca will probably carry those. Cruise missiles to attack targets above the waves? The Orca will likely host those too. Imagine an Orca swimming up to an enemy shipyard. From there it can do all sorts of damage. Maybe it lays mines in these shallow waters to obstruct the enemy fleet's ability to get to sea for a long time to come. Normally such an operation would be fraught with danger, but since there's no human crew, it doesn't matter much if the Orca takes the risk. And there's more. As we've hinted, China relies heavily on anti-access area denial strategy to prevent the US Navy's ships from getting too close to its coast. If you're a US Navy sailor, the closer you get, the more danger you're in from ballistic and cruise missiles that China has stockpiled over the years. If you're an Orca though, you can get close and fire off some torpedoes or missiles at vital targets without any risk to the Navy at large. But wait, there's more. What about a drone inside a drone? Well, one novel idea is that the Orca might become a drone mothership. The US Navy is experimenting with smaller drones that can both swim and fly. For example, take a look at this drone, the Navigator. At first glance, you might mistake it for one of the millions of Ukrainian FPV drones that have become the menace of Russia's tank crews. But this one is designed to be able to move both underwater and in the air. The initial vision for the Navigator is to act as a stealthy surveillance drone that can map mines or enemy ships and submerge before they're spotted. However, it wouldn't be a long leap to turn these into offensive machines too. Imagine a swarm of them carrying jammers to disrupt enemy electronic systems, droppable bombs, or just acting as kamikaze drones. They have the potential to wreak as much havoc on Chinese sailors as much as Ukraine's have had on Russian soldiers. The Orca will be able to launch and recover these Navigators autonomously. Now imagine the Orca swimming silently to a strategic spot, launching a swarm of these smaller drones, which are themselves autonomous, and then either retreating to let them do their dirty work or recovering them all later, all without any human intervention. That's a lot to take in. If you're an officer with the China's People's Liberation Army Navy, you might look at the Orca and think it's a major threat. But based on what you've heard up to now, maybe only at shorter ranges close to the US bases or surface ships hanging back beyond the first island chain, you would be wrong to make that assumption. The Orca might not be up to par with the US Navy's manned nuclear submarines when it comes to range or its ability to stay undetected, but it isn't exactly lacking in these attributes. The propulsion system is unique. It's a hybrid diesel-electric system with lithium-ion batteries. Why does this matter? Traditional diesel-electric submarines rely on rechargeable lead-acid batteries. When recharging these batteries, the submarine must run its diesel engines by snorkeling near the surface or emerging outright. This naturally makes diesel-electric submarines much easier to detect over a long span of time. Most of China's submarines are diesel-electric, which limits their range and ability to stay silent. There are ways to get around this shortcoming, such as an air-independent propulsion system, but there are some trade-offs that come with this. For example, Sweden's famous Gotland-class submarines need to carry liquid oxygen oxidizer, which can add dangers, and the Stirling engines and other equipment needed to make the system work take up valuable space. But the Orca uses a lithium-ion battery. These batteries are lighter than lead-acid batteries, can keep the same output with low power, can be charged faster, and store more energy. The lithium-ion battery will allow the Orca to run on electric power, which is quieter than nuclear power, for longer. The downside with lithium-ion batteries, as you probably know, is they can combust and give off toxic fumes while expelling conductive dust, but since no one's on board the Orca anyway, there's not a lot of danger there. This power system should keep the Orca at sea, cruising at speeds of 3 knots for up to months at a time, even if the purely autonomous missions are less than that. Just as importantly, the power system will keep the Orca mostly quiet. To keep it even quieter, it will use a shrouded propulsor rather than a conventional propeller. This nifty piece of equipment lowers the sonar signature of a submarine by reducing cavitation, the air bubbles that form behind propeller blades, which are noisy. A shrouded propulsor is also more efficient than exposed propeller designs, as it reduces wasted energy. These technologies make the Orca an ideal platform for a mission that will become more important in the next decade: hunting Chinese submarines. Why will this become a bigger issue? As you already know, the US Navy has a significant advantage against the PLAN in submarine and anti-submarine warfare. But China knows that too. China's advantage in shipbuilding also extends to submarines, and it's already used it. China, in fact, now has more submarines than the United States at 72 to 68. China's submarines, though, are mostly based on older, Cold War-era designs that are noisy and easy to detect. Even its current nuclear submarines, such as the Type 091 Han class and Type 094 Jin class, are flawed. Why do they make a lot of noise? Well, for starters, they're too small to conceal the sound of their engines. But China knows this disadvantage too, which is why it's building 2 new types of nuclear submarine, the Type 095 attack submarine and the Type 096 ballistic missile submarine. Both of these submarines are expected to make their debuts in the early 2030s. They will be a lot quieter than their predecessors, thanks to their larger size and onboard noise cancellation technology, such as an internal raft mounted on rubber supports to further absorb noise from the engine. Speaking to Reuters in October 2023, Christopher Carlson, a retired submariner and current researcher at the US Naval War College, predicted the new Chinese submarines would be similar to the improved Akula-class submarines in the Russian Navy, which he said are already hard enough to find and track. China is also improving the armaments its submarines can use. In 2022, it deployed the new JL-3 ballistic missile on its Type 094 Jin-class submarines for the first time, just 4 years after its development began. The JL-3 reportedly has a range between 5,500 and 6,200 miles and can carry up to 3 multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. The range is less than the American Trident II's 7,500 miles, and carrying a full load likely reduces it further. But for the first time, Chinese SLBMs can hit part of the continental United States from the A2AD zone behind the First Island chain. But the JL-3 can still not hit the entirety of the American mainland from there. The PLAN submariners will need to get closer for that. For now, China's noisy submarines have a hard time escaping the choke points of the First Island chain and getting into the wider ocean without being detected. China is hoping that its new submarine, the Type 096, will solve this problem and bring the entirety of the continental United States within reach. Unfortunately for the Chinese, the United States has also anticipated this problem. It intends to deploy its abundant force of Orcas beneath the waves to make China's nuclear plans much harder to accomplish. The new submarines will be quieter, but geography means that the US Navy knows where China will have to go through to get its new toys out to sea. With a lot of Orcas on hand that know what to do on their own, the labor-intensive process of hunting for submarines will likely get a lot easier at just the time that China intends for the new underwater fleet to make its debut. But will the timeline work? How fast can the Orca get to the Navy in big enough numbers? It will need to happen quickly for the Orca to grow into the role the Navy intends for it. The Navy awarded the Orca contract to Boeing over its competitor Lockheed Martin in February 2019. The total value of the initial contract for 5 Orcas was $274.4 million, giving each Orca an approximate price tag of about $55 million. Sound expensive? When you consider that the unit cost of the coming Columbia-class submarine is likely about $9 billion per unit, the cheapness comes into perspective. The price tag and the fact that the initial 2 Orcas were delivered in less than a year and more on their way suggest that the US Navy can get these quickly and just in time to ramp the production line up if the first Orcas perform well. The fast delivery time will be reassuring for policymakers in Washington. The Pentagon has been increasingly nervous that its conventional military advantage in the Indo-Pacific region has been deteriorating. Officially, 2049 is the target date to bring Taiwan under the mainland's governance, but because of China's looming economic and demographic problems, the pressure will be on Xi Jinping to make the move sooner, as a now-or-never mentality grows in Beijing. In such an environment, it's paramount for the United States to restore its deterrence. An assembly line of Orcas might be one thing that makes Beijing think twice about using force to resolve the dispute across the Taiwan Strait. Fortunately for Washington, it looks like it can get that assembly line going at just the time it needs to. How do you think the Orca will affect the precarious balance of power in the Indo-Pacific region? Is the US Navy right to be optimistic about it? Don't forget to let us know in the comments. Also, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more military analysis from military experts. Now go and check out Ukraine is using vampire drones to drop robot dogs on Russians, or click this other video instead.